The night everything changed, I wasn't even supposed to be awake. My husband Eric was passed out beside me, snoring softly with one leg wrapped around the blanket like a human pretzel. It was one of those quiet nights when everything felt calm until his phone lit up on the nightstand. I ignored it at first. Probably work, I thought. He'd been getting more late-night calls lately. But then I saw the name, Lena, work. The label seemed overly specific, like he was trying too hard to justify it. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked up the phone and answered in a low voice. Hello? Silence. Then a woman's voice. You're not supposed to answer his phone. Her tone was flat, not surprised, like I had ruined a routine. I hesitated. Who is this? Another pause. I'm sorry. I thought. She didn't finish the sentence. The call ended. I stared at the screen, heartbeat picking up. The screen had returned to the photo of me and Eric on our wedding day, his arm around my waist, both of us smiling like idiots. I put the phone back where I found it and lay still, pretending to sleep. That woman hadn't misdialed. She knew him. And she hadn't expected me to answer because she expected him to. I stared at the ceiling for hours, waiting for him to stir, to wake, to give me a reason to bring it up. He didn't. Instead, he turned over, muttered something about quarterly reports, and drifted deeper into sleep. I knew Eric had changed lately, subtle things, like the way he turned his phone screen away when I walked into the room, or how he suddenly started wearing cologne to the office after 10 years of forgetting. But I never imagined there'd be another woman. I didn't even know who Lena was. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it really was work. Maybe the tone in her voice was stress. But deep down, I knew. I knew something had fractured, and I wasn't going to be able to pretend it hadn't. Not anymore. The next morning, I acted like nothing happened. I kissed Eric goodbye as he rushed out the door, coffee in one hand and a Bluetooth headset in the other, muttering something about back-to-back calls. He barely looked me in the eye. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, I went straight for his phone. He never left it behind, but today, by some stroke of divine irony or mistake, he had. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. For months, he'd kept it locked with facial recognition, but after a recent update, he'd switched it back to a passcode. I knew it. His mother's birthday. Typical. My fingers flew through the contacts until I found her, Lena, work. The message thread was long. I scrolled through weeks of texts, watching the casual professionalism dissolve into something far more intimate. Dinner Friday? She'd written. I'll tell Mia it's movie night. Mia. I whispered aloud. Who was that? More messages followed. Wish I didn't have to leave your bed so early. The way you talk about your wife, she doesn't deserve you. My breath caught in my throat. The messages painted a timeline. This had been going on for months, maybe longer. He wasn't just flirting. He was confiding in her, sharing details about our marriage, my schedule, even our anniversary plans. Just a few more weeks and things will be easier, he'd written last Thursday. I couldn't stop shaking. I emailed screenshots to myself, backed up the photos, and erased my digital fingerprints. Then I opened the photo gallery. Dozens of pictures, hotel rooms, wine glasses, their feet in sand somewhere warm. And one that made me sink to the floor. Eric, lying on a couch with a little girl curled up on his chest. The caption read, "My whole heart." My vision blurred. This wasn't a fling. It wasn't a mistake. This was a second life. Another woman, a child, a future that wasn't supposed to exist. I felt the room tilt. I grabbed the counter for balance. All this time, he'd been coming home to me, laughing, eating dinner, pretending. And all along, he had a daughter. My husband had a secret family, and I had no idea who the hell I was married to anymore. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I saw the photos. Not when I realized the little girl looked just like him. Same dark curls, same sleepy eyes. I went cold instead, like my body instinctively numbed me from falling apart. I sat at the kitchen table for what must have been 2 hours, the phone screen dark beside me, just staring at it like it might suddenly confess more if I looked long enough. When Eric finally texted to say he'd be late because of an impromptu strategy meeting, I typed back, of course, love you, with hands so steady it scared me. I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. I needed more. Proof. Context. Something to help me understand the scope of the lie I was living in. So I called the one person who wouldn't ask too many questions, Clara, an old friend of mine who now worked as a private investigator. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I trusted her. She didn't press. She just said, "Send me what you have." I emailed her the screenshots, the photos, Lena's number. Within 48 hours, Clara had a full file waiting for me in a Dropbox folder. Eric was renting a second home under a different name, Eric Grant. A neat little bungalow across town. Mortgage paid through a shell company. Utilities in Lena's name. Neighbors believed they were a married couple. They even had a dog. I sat on my bed that night, laptop open, zooming in on a photo of the front of their house. Pink bike on the lawn. Wind chimes. A mailbox that said the Grants. I laughed, quiet, bitter. He gave them a name. A permanent one. This wasn't a side relationship. This was a constructed life. I couldn't sleep. The next day, I followed him. He said he had a team dinner, but I already knew where he was going. I stayed 2 cars behind as he drove across the city, turned into a residential street, and pulled into a driveway like he'd done it 100 times before. The front door opened. Lena greeted him with a kiss. The little girl ran out and leapt into his arms. I parked 3 houses down, blinked through tears, and watched my husband, the man who'd shared my bed, my life, my future, live a version of it with someone else, like it was just another appointment in his calendar. I sat frozen in the car, unable to breathe as I watched them, my husband, that woman, and their daughter, move through a scene so domestic it could have been a commercial. Lena handed Eric a grocery bag. He kissed her on the cheek, and the little girl danced around his legs in circles, giggling. I couldn't stop staring. He looked relaxed, natural, like he belonged there, like he'd done this 1,000 times. It wasn't the look of a man sneaking around. It was the look of a man who had built a second life from the ground up, one carefully insulated from discovery. I stayed for 20 minutes, long enough to see them go inside and turn on the living room lights. I only left when my stomach finally turned so violently I had to pull over 2 blocks away to throw up in someone's rose bushes. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, every minute ticking by with deafening clarity. When Eric came home after midnight, smelling faintly of jasmine and wine, I pretended to be half asleep. He slipped into bed beside me, kissed my shoulder like he always did, and whispered, "Long night." Sorry, I didn't respond. My body remained still, frozen in a facade of rest. My mind, though, was miles away, back on that porch, that woman, that child who called him daddy. Over the next week, I pretended to be the same. I cooked. I cleaned. I asked about his day. And every night, I stared at that ceiling, rehearsing every scenario, screaming confrontations, cold ultimatums, silent departures. But none of them gave me the clarity I needed. So I went back to Clara. "I need to know more," I told her. "I need to know everything." She nodded without asking questions. Within a few days, she delivered a second file. It had birth records, school enrollment forms, daycare payment histories. The child, Mia, was his. Not just biologically. He'd signed her birth certificate. He was listed as the emergency contact at her preschool. He picked her up twice a week. On Wednesdays, when he said he went to the gym, he'd lied so easily, so naturally. I began to realize that this wasn't just betrayal. It was performance. An entire act staged perfectly between 2 homes, 2 women, 2 lives. And I had applauded him for being such a hard worker. After a few days, my sadness turned to something sharper. A controlled kind of fury. It simmered beneath the surface while I folded laundry, stirred dinner, kissed his cheek when he left for meetings. It was surreal, carrying the weight of his deception while he moved through our shared space like nothing had changed. But I had changed. I couldn't unsee the images or unread the messages. I couldn't unknow the child whose bedtime story he read every Wednesday while I thought he was lifting weights. I didn't want a messy confrontation. I didn't want screaming matches or tear-streaked apologies. I wanted strategy. So I began collecting. Quietly, methodically. Every lie he told. Every receipt he forgot to hide. Every credit card statement and travel itinerary. I made copies, backed them up, emailed them to a secure account. I contacted a divorce attorney under a fake name and asked every question I could think of. What happens if he used our marital assets to support another family? Could I request a financial audit? Could I subpoena Lena if she denied involvement? I learned quickly. While he smiled across the table and asked if I wanted another glass of wine, I was building a legal map of his destruction. One night, I tested him. "Do you still want kids?" I asked casually as we lay in bed. He blinked. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Eventually. You know how busy work is." I nodded. "And if I couldn't have them?" I asked. Would that change anything? He reached out, brushed my cheek. I married you, not for what you could give me, for who you are. My stomach twisted at the ease with which he lied. I wanted to scream, but I smiled instead. I love you, I whispered. I love you too, he replied, without missing a beat. And then he rolled over and began to snore. I stared at his back, numb. The next morning, I drove to Lena's neighborhood. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I just needed to see it again to remind myself it was real. The wind chimes were still on the porch. The little pink bike still leaned against the steps. But this time, there was a new addition, a wooden sign staked in the lawn that read, "Happy Birthday, Mia, 4." It was her birthday, and I hadn't seen my husband since the night before. I drove straight home and sat in the driveway for over an hour, engine off, phone in my lap, staring at our front door like it no longer belonged to me. I felt hollow, not angry, not even betrayed, just emptied out, like someone had scooped the life out of my chest and left the shell to sit there in the quiet suburban sun. When Eric came home that evening, he walked through the door humming a tune I didn't recognize, carrying a takeout bag with our favorite Thai food. "Surprise," he said cheerfully. "Thought we could have a lazy night." I nodded like everything was fine. He kissed me and joked about traffic, sat down at the table, and asked me about my day. I gave vague answers, asked him nothing in return. Part of me wanted him to notice. The other part hoped he never would, just so I could watch how far he'd go pretending. He never asked. Not once. That night, after he fell asleep, I returned to the living room and opened the file Clara had sent me earlier. It had new documents, this time about identity. Apparently, Eric had used a fake middle name to register the second house. The mortgage documents listed an Eric J. Grant. He had used a variation of his real last name, slightly altered. In tax records, he'd claimed single status at that address. In our home, we filed jointly. I began connecting the dots. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't even a second family in the romantic sense. It was fraud. Legal, financial, marital fraud. He had created an entirely different version of himself. And the kicker? Lena had signed forms with her own name beside his. She wasn't innocent. She was complicit. They had a shared bank account, a joint savings plan. I found a receipt for a weekend getaway at a cabin just outside the city, booked for the Grants. My jaw clenched. He had taken me to that same cabin 2 years ago for our anniversary. He'd recycled the destination. The lies weren't just strategic, they were lazy. A pattern formed in my mind, looping like a silent scream. Same lines, same gifts, same trips. We weren't even unique. I was just one half of a duplicated life. But I wasn't going to be the forgotten half. Not anymore. It took everything I had not to walk into our bedroom and scream the truth in his face. Instead, I waited. I waited because exposing him in a burst of anger would only give him the upper hand. I wanted control. I wanted closure on my terms. So I kept moving quietly. I consulted the divorce lawyer again, this time using my real name. She was sharp, confident, and unimpressed by my husband's secret juggling act. "He's in deep," she said, flipping through the files I handed her. "And if he used joint finances to support another household, that's marital fraud. You'll have leverage. A lot of it." It was validating to hear someone say it aloud. For weeks, I had questioned my own reality. Now, I had legal confirmation. I wasn't crazy. I was wronged. That night, I sat across from Eric at dinner and asked about the weekend. "Thinking of heading to the cabin," I said, stabbing my salad. "We haven't been in so long." He nearly choked on his water. "The cabin." "Yeah, you remember," I said, locking eyes with him. "The one near Silver Pine Lake." "Oh," he said too quickly. "That one. It's probably booked this late." I checked. I replied smoothly. "It's available. Thought we could revisit old memories." He nodded, smiling a little too wide. "Maybe in a few weeks. Work's just crazy right now." Liar. He had just gone to that exact cabin with Lena and their daughter. I kept my face neutral, biting my tongue until it bled. After dinner, he kissed my forehead and left for a late meeting. I followed. This time, I didn't stop at watching. I waited until he was inside her house, lights glowing warmly in the window, and I knocked on her door. Lena answered in pajama pants and a robe, her hair tied in a loose bun. She looked confused for exactly 2 seconds before realization dawned. "You're his wife," I finished. "The original one." Her face went pale. "Listen, I didn't. Save it," I snapped. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to show you exactly who he's been lying to. Which is both of us." I handed her a thick envelope, The same file Clara had sent me. Her hands trembled as she opened it and began scanning the pages. "He told me you were divorced," she whispered. "He said you left him years ago." "Yeah," I said. "He's got a real gift for fiction." She looked up at me, tears in her eyes, and I knew then that she had been lied to almost as much as I had. Almost. For a long moment, Lena didn't speak. She just sat on the porch steps, her hands clenched around the stack of documents I'd handed her, eyes scanning each page like they might burst into flames. I stayed quiet. I didn't pity her, but I wasn't there to destroy her either. I just needed her to see what I had lived with in silence, the photos, the financials, the timelines that proved my husband had perfected the art of duplicity. "I had no idea," she finally murmured. "I swear. He told me you left, that you moved to New York and cut contact." I nodded. "And I suppose he said he'd eventually file the papers, but work got in the way?" She flinched. "That was a yes. He promised me we'd get married this year," she whispered. "That Mia would finally have a proper family." Her voice cracked on the word proper. I felt a wave of something bitterness, maybe, or just the ache of a shared delusion. "Mia's innocent," I said quietly. "She doesn't deserve to be caught in this." Lena nodded. "Neither do you." We sat in silence for a moment until the front door opened. Eric stepped out, holding a plate with what looked like birthday cake. He froze when he saw me. "What the hell?" he began, eyes darting from me to Lena. "You need to leave," I said, standing slowly. "Go back to your real house. The one you share with your wife." "This is a mistake," he said quickly, stepping toward me. "We can talk. Just no." Lena cut in. "No more talking." Eric looked between us like a man realizing both of his worlds had just collided, and that neither was willing to catch him. He tried to explain, of course. Said I misunderstood. That Lena had pushed for the relationship, that he stayed for Mia's sake, that I had grown distant. "You lied," I said simply. "You cheated. You split your life in two. And now both sides are burning." He opened his mouth again, but I was already walking away. I didn't wait for more lies. I didn't need them. I left him standing there with frosting on his fingers and panic in his eyes. That night, I slept in a hotel. In the morning, I filed for divorce, emailed my lawyer everything, and asked her to initiate a forensic audit of our joint finances. Lena sent me a short message later. "Thank you. I had no idea. I'm sorry for everything." I replied with a single line. "He fooled us both. But we get to decide what happens now." Eric didn't come home for 2 days. I wasn't sure if he was hiding with Lena, scrambling to explain, or sleeping in his car trying to rewrite reality in his head. Either way, I didn't care. I had moved into the guest bedroom, changed the locks, and alerted my lawyer to prepare for a full separation of assets. The morning after filing, I sat with a banker and began the process of dividing accounts. That's when the first shock hit me, a series of large transfers I hadn't noticed before. Thousands of dollars moved every month to his secondary account under a trust name I didn't recognize, Green Pine Holdings. I asked the clerk to dig deeper, and after confirming my marital authorization, she printed statements that turned my stomach. Those funds didn't just support Lena and Mia. They were also paying off a luxury apartment rental in another city, high-end furniture purchases, and regular payments to someone named Ava Ryland. Ava? Another name. Another life? I drove home numb. I called Clara again. "Find out who Ava is," I said. And fast. Within 48 hours, Clara had another report. Ava was a freelance photographer in Chicago. Early 30s. No children. But she had one shared lease agreement with Eric Grant. She even posted photos of a man's arm in her Instagram stories. I recognized the watch. He had told me it was a one-of-a-kind gift from his grandfather. "He's not just cheating," Clara said. "He's building empires. Personal ones. In parallel. A third life. Not just another affair. A whole relationship, complete with vacations, rent, and promises." My hands trembled as I opened Instagram and saw Ava's caption from just 2 days ago. "Can't wait for you to come home. B. Miss you already." I forwarded it to my lawyer. "We're not just going after divorce," I wrote. "I want everything on the table: fraud, financial deception, emotional damages." Eric finally texted me that night. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. Instead, I called Lena. She didn't answer at first. When she finally picked up, her voice was dull, emotionless. "I know about Ava," I said. "You should too." Silence. "Then, he told me you'd lie. That you'd try to destroy him." I sent her the financials and the screenshots. "You think I'm lying?" She didn't answer, but 10 minutes later, she called back. Let's end this. Together. Lena and I met the next morning at a small diner on the edge of town, neutral ground, away from both our homes and far from any space Eric might feel comfortable stepping into. She looked tired, older than just a week before, her hair pulled back roughly, her face free of makeup. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, stirring her coffee without drinking it. I keep asking myself how I didn't see it. How he fooled me. I nodded. He fooled us both. He had practice. I slid over a folder, Ava's records, the apartment lease, screenshots of social media posts and transfers. You need to see the full picture. It's not just me and you. Lena flipped through the document slowly. I watched as the color drained from her face. He told me he was trying to get out of a bad marriage, she said in a flat voice. That you were unstable. That you cheated first. He said he stayed for Mia, but his heart wasn't here. I wanted to laugh. The irony of it all. He said something similar to me, I replied. That you were an accident. A mistake he regretted, but had to manage because of the child. Lena closed the folder and met my eyes. I want to help. Then you will, I said. You have access to his life in a way I don't. Bank cards. Communication habits. I want everything, because I'm going to take him apart piece by piece. Not out of revenge. Out of survival. Lena agreed. Over the next few days, we worked silently, like business partners. She sent me photos of receipts, screenshots of texts, travel confirmations, even a list of passwords he used across multiple accounts. It was staggering how much overlap he allowed between identities, reusing security questions, duplicating email structures, saving the same passwords under slightly different aliases. Meanwhile, I updated my lawyer, provided new evidence daily, and we began building a case strong enough to press criminal charges. Then came the final blow. Clara uncovered a secret savings account under Mia's name, but the deposits didn't match what Eric earned from his job. They were far larger and coming from multiple untraceable sources. He's laundering money, Clara said flatly, or at the very least, hiding it. This isn't just personal anymore. It's federal. That's when I knew we had him. Eric wasn't just a liar or a cheater. He was a criminal. And now we had enough to bring his entire house of cards down. The moment we had enough, I contacted my lawyer, who brought in a federal investigator. What had started as a messy domestic disaster had now unraveled into something deeper: fraud, financial misrepresentation, possibly tax evasion. The evidence we collected wasn't just damning, it was layered. Eric had used marital assets to fund multiple households, funneled money into shadow accounts under his daughter's name, and opened credit lines and aliases that technically didn't exist. The federal agent, an intimidating but soft-spoken woman named Reyes, sat with me for 3 hours, quietly listening as I laid out everything. When I finished, she said only 2 words: "He's done." From that moment, everything moved fast. A subpoena was issued. Lena and I provided sworn statements. Clara turned over her entire research file. The FBI flagged multiple accounts tied to Green Pine Holdings, and before Eric could blink, his assets were frozen. The day they came for him, I didn't go to work. I sat at home on the couch, coffee in hand, the silence vibrating with anticipation. At exactly 2:14 p.m., I got the call. "He's in custody," Reyes said calmly. He tried to play dumb, claimed the accounts were fabricated. But once we mentioned Ava Ryland and the trust account under Mia's name, he changed color. I thanked her, then sat in the stillness. No music, no TV, just quiet. The kind that comes after a storm. That evening, I received an email from Ava. It was short, polite. She apologized. Said she had no idea he was married, let alone twice over. She ended the message with a line that hit harder than I expected. I thought he loved me, but I guess he loved the act of being loved more. I never replied. What could I say? We were all characters in his performance. The following week, I began divorce proceedings officially. My lawyer pushed for full asset control, citing fraud and misappropriation of marital funds. The judge granted it. Lena filed a protection order to prevent him from contacting Mia, and I moved forward with a civil suit to claim damages. The legal system, cold and slow as it often was, worked in our favor because the evidence was undeniable. Eric, now stripped of his career and reputation, sat in a holding cell awaiting trial, facing charges that could put him away for years. And yet, through all of it, I didn't feel victorious. I felt clean, clear, like the lie had finally been peeled off my skin. And I could begin again, without pretending to be a wife to a man who never really existed. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. not with family or friends. Eric didn't have many of those left, but with reporters, attorneys, and a few curious spectators who had followed the story as it spread. A successful executive with a hidden double life? A loving husband funding multiple homes with stolen marital assets? It made for perfect headlines. I sat near the front, Lena beside me, our attorneys on either side. Eric entered in a gray suit that hung looser on him than it used to. He looked older, thinner, the arrogant smirk long gone. For the first time in our marriage, he avoided my eyes. I wondered what was going through his head. Maybe he still thought he could talk his way out, charm the jury, spin another version of himself to suit the occasion. But there were no scripts left. The trial was swift. The evidence spoke louder than anyone could. 3 identities, 2 properties, dozens of false filings, fabricated job titles and side companies. Ava testified remotely, her voice steady, heartbreak carefully tucked beneath her professionalism. Lena spoke next, her voice cracking only once, when she described how Mia asked where Daddy went. I was last. I read my victim impact statement aloud, not out of revenge, but to reclaim the truth. I gave him my time, my loyalty, my belief in something real. He gave me a performance. A man who could love multiple women, live multiple lives, and never feel guilty until he was caught. I wasn't a wife to him. I was an alibi. Eric stared straight ahead, expression unreadable. When I stepped down, I didn't look back. The judge sentenced him to 7 years. Fraud, identity deception, and financial misconduct. No early parole. No second act. After the trial, Lena and I took Mia for ice cream. She didn't understand most of it, but she understood we were safe. That Daddy was gone for a while. In time, we explained more. Carefully. Honestly. I moved cities a few months later, started fresh. New place. New name on the mailbox. I found work helping other women who'd experienced deception like mine. Turns out, there are many of us. Survivors of manipulation masked as affection. I don't hate Eric anymore. He'll always be the man who taught me how easy it is to live a lie, but more importantly, how powerful it is to finally step into the truth. And that, I decided, is the only life I'll ever live again.